You're 19. The torches smell of pitch and wool. Their light throws the marble into hard, tremulous shapes. Outside, a knot of voices, men singing, someone banging a tambourine, someone else laughing too loud, presses at the doorway like weather. It's too late to step back. You are lifted, carried over the threshold by hands that mean business. Your father's hands have loosened their grip. Another man's fingers close around yours. This is the night everyone assumes is private. It is not. This is what the Romans hid about their wedding nights for 2,000 years. If you want more excavations of hidden histories, like and subscribe so you don't miss the rest. It is the year 89 CE, in the shadow of Domitian's rule. A world in which marriage is less a romance than a legal transaction made visible. Legally, your marriage is a transfer. Your father's guardianship ends. Your husband's authority begins. But law in Rome often moves less by paper than by ritual. Religion, witness, and a particular kind of verification stand in where we might expect forms and signatures. Inside the chamber, you feel the architecture of power as much as the stone under your feet. The pronuba, an older woman appointed to oversee the rite, waits in the circle of light. A priest stands ready with muted formulas. A physician, cool and clinical, is there too, having examined you earlier in private in some documented cases. A scribe holds a stylus and a wax tablet. Slaves hover like shadowed punctuation. 7 witnesses are counted in the tradition you have been told will justify this union. 7 is a legal pattern. In the corner, wrapped and small, the carved fertility figure sits hidden until the moment someone deems it necessary to uncloak. In some ancient accounts, the name appears oddly garbled, Mutinus Tutunis, in a later transcription. But scholars usually render the association as the deity likely known as Mutunus Tutunus. The name matters less than the function, a deity pressed into service as a legal actor. The pronuba's voice is not meant to coax tenderness, it is meant to instruct. She tells you to approach the statue, and her words have a double edge, religious invocation and procedural demand. You are asked to place yourself before the god, not as an act of private devotion, but as a piece of evidence. This is religion folded into paperwork. The ritual language frames the move as consecration. The social reality is verification. Before the torches gutter, there was already a quieter inspection. In some documented cases, physicians performed a preliminary examination, a glance and a hands-on check, recorded in the idiom of the day as a kind of medical attestation. We should be careful here. Greco-Roman medical testimony and legal standards do not map neatly onto modern gynecology, and sources differ. Some descriptions come from later Christian writers, who reported the scene with moral outrage. Others are fragmentary. Where sources are late or polemical, treat their details as testimony filtered through discomfort. Still, across a selection of texts and funerary inscriptions, a pattern emerges. Bodies were instruments of legal proof, as much as they were sites of intimacy. The scribe's tablet matters more than you do tonight. The physician's note, ink or impression, perhaps a line on wax, will become an official mark, concilium, testimony, proof. A seal pressed into soft wax turns ephemeral speech into durable record. In law, witnesses testify because they make memory public. The tablet makes it permanent. The ritual, then, is less a private consummation than a proving ground where the social world decides whether the transfer has been real. You are led toward the statue. The pronuba parts the cloth that concealed the god. Its face, however crudely carved, occupies a place between sacred and procedural. For the crowd, for the witnesses, even for the priest, the god is less a being than a mechanism. Bring the human body before it. Let the act be seen, verified, and recorded. The opening of the veil is a theatrical moment. But theater here is law. When the night deepens, the door is often left ajar. Lamps burn bright. The people who must bear witness stand near enough to hear, and far enough to observe. The consummation, what we would call the intimate act, is staged as a public legal step with private consequences. Language in the sources is clinical or euphemistic by turns. Later moralizers call it obscene, others treat it as prosaic. Our modern urge is to imagine candle-lit privacy. Roman practice, in the documented examples that survive, made privacy subordinate to proof. There is a procedural choreography to it. The physician who saw you before returns with a different business, to examine once more and to confirm that the required signs of consummation are present. Do not mistake this for some universal medical procedure applied across every region and every class. It appears in certain documented instances and later writings. The physician's role is, in some accounts, forensic, to convert the body's change into a legal stamp. A scribe records the finding. The pronuba and witnesses attest. A seal is pressed. The wax tablet becomes a certificate that can be shown in disputes about inheritance or legitimacy. When the physician reports what he sees, the room hums in the brittle way of small world diplomacy, finally resolved. For Marcus Petronius Rufus, the man now your husband, this is relief made public. For him, the document means patrimony secured, offspring authenticated, property lines unblurred. For you, the moment is different. You have been present as both person and evidence. Your body's privacy has been transmuted into public proof. There is fear in that conversion, a humiliation that ritual normalizes. You are not the only one to feel it in these accounts. Many ancient and modern readers sense the discomfort. But remember, the scale and frequency of such detailed procedures are a matter of debate. Some elite weddings certainly rehearsed these scripts. For others, among different classes in different locales, the choreography varied. At the climate of this ritual is a kind of statecraft. Rome had reasons to prefer verifiable paternity. Property transmission was a pillar of elite stability. Religion provided ceremony. Witnesses provided testimony. Physicians provided a version of expertise. Combined, they created social certainty. Yet the very mechanism that made family lines legible also exposed the gendered asymmetries of Roman society. The bride's body stood where contracts and identity were being negotiated. Marriage was a legal instrument. The wedding night in this framing was its audit. Later writers had trouble sitting with this. Augustine, writing centuries afterward, treats some of these rites with moral disgust and exaggeration. He is a source we consult, but with caution. His descriptions preserve details that might otherwise have been lost, but he recorded them through a lens of Christian critique. That partial preservation is how many of these practices remained in the historical record, remembered awkwardly by those who judged them. Elsewhere, elite Roman literature often omits such intimate legal mechanics from public accounts. Polite histories and poetry preferred images of love or conquest. They left the technical apparatus to silence. Silence is itself a form of hiding. Why hide what was plainly procedural? Part of the answer lies in shame and status. The rituals exposed bodily particulars that elites preferred not to discuss in public art or polished writing. Another part is rhetorical. To maintain an image of marriage as sanctified and tender, Roman elites relegated the procedural to the liminal spaces, bedchambers, whispers, attestations. Once Christian moralists began cataloging and condemning these scenes, the combined force of elite decorum and ecclesiastical censure pushed them further into the margins of memory. Over the centuries, reticence hardened into omission. What remained was fragmentary testimony, occasional scandalous mention, and the occasional wax tablet preserved by accident. You gather your linens mechanically. No one offers comfort. The linens are important because they can be evidence too. Stains and sheets were part of disputes in certain legal contests. The ritual ends not with a private embrace, but with inventory. Bedsheets folded, tablets sealed, witnesses dispersing. The seals click. The scribe tucks the tablet away. You are sent to the private suite to recover, but recovery is not the main point. The main point was accomplished. Your body has been witnessed. The law now has grounds to act. Imagine the scene from a different angle. A Roman jurist might have called the whole operation prudential, an attempt to avert future litigation over heirs. A satirist might have scoffed at the spectacle. A modern reader feels a sharp ethical sting. A person reduced to evidence. These are valid reactions, but they must be tempered by historical care. Not every household performed each step exactly as described in surviving texts. Regional variations, social class differences, changes across decades, all introduce doubt. When I say the Romans, read it as shorthand for a set of practices documented in some sources and debated in scholarship. Where sources are later, like Augustine, mark them as later testimony. Where they are legal texts or inscriptions, treat them as more immediate, but still partial. What was hidden then is not merely the fact of ritual, but the intimate bookkeeping that underwrote social order. The secrecy was practical and rhetorical. Practical because the details embarrassed and unsettled polite discourse. Rhetorical because a civilized facade required leaving the machinery offstage. That combination explains the silence that stretches oddly long. Over 2 millennia, ritual specifics receded into moralizing anecdotes or vanished into private household practices. Only when later commentators, archaeologists, and legal historians began to stitch together fragments did the pattern re-emerge. For you, Flavia, the sealing of the wax tablet is the night's decisive moment. When the seal presses into the surface, it is not only clay that hardens. Your status, your legal position, hardens in the eyes of the community. The seal is small and indifferent. It is a bureaucratic gesture with existential force. It makes the private public and the transient durable. The tablet will travel into archives or be kept as a domestic talisman. It will be understood if dispute arrives. The intimate act has been repurposed as evidence, and evidence is what Rome prized for maintaining order. As you lie awake, the torchlight has burned low. The house is quiet except for the distant city. The truth of the night might seem grotesque. That intimacy was instrumented, that religion could be a form of paperwork, that a body could be turned into a certificate. Yet the broader lesson is not only one of cruelty, it is a lesson in how societies convert uncertainty into stability. By looking and recording, by making witnesses of neighbors, by binding sacred words to legal ends. The mechanism is efficient. The human cost is often ignored. 2,000 years of polite history were content to ignore these costs. The reticence was reinforced by embarrassment and by changing moral narratives. When later writers did mention the rights, they often did so to judge, not to explain. So their accounts must be read as both preservation and distortion. Modern scholars piece together the fragments with caution, aware that every fragment carries bias. But the fragments insist on one uncomfortable conclusion. The wedding night could be performed as law, and that fact was not always spoken aloud. If this unsettled you, consider what it means that legal certainty once took precedence over personal privacy. Consider how rituals can convert bodies into instruments of social order. Consider, finally, how history hides what is inconvenient to the stories a culture tells about itself. If you want a deeper dive into the legal texts, the later Christian sources, such as Augustine, and the archaeological fragments that underlie this reconstruction, check the show notes for sources and watch our companion episode on Roman family law. Tell us in the comments, which part surprised you most?